I'm Bonnie Kemke. Welcome to my studio and welcome to Quilting on a Thread. Today will be one of my T3 videos. That's the tools, tips, and techniques that I use in my studio every day to make my life a little easier. The tool and my tips that we'll cover today have to do with our cutting mats. Now, I'm not going to discuss the rulers, the templates, the rotary cutters, and I'm not even going to discuss the measurement markings on your mat. That's a whole nother video. So your mat is made up of PVC. That's polyvinyl chloride. The principal materials that are combined to make PVC are basically derived from salts and oil, and that influences how we care for the mat. Our dual-sided cutting mats are composed of 3 layers of this PVC product. The center layer is a flat, thin sheet of flexible PVC, and the upper and lower levels are both upright strands, filaments if you will, of PVC that are tightly coupled together, bound together. They're not affixed to one another, they're affixed to the center layer of PVC, but they're all stacked together like a box of straws or a box of pencils, and they stand upright, and that's what gives our mats the self-healing quality, because those filaments can be pulled apart and then they come back together. So if we didn't have these filaments that create our cutting surface and give us that ability to slice through and part them, we would have a solid surface with a rotary cutter. We have a very, very thin section, very thin intersection. And as this blade is rotating along, it can give us these wobbles. We'd have very inaccurate cuts if it weren't for the formation of our mat and the rotary cutter. So what would happen is if we have the PVC mat with the filaments, then the rotary cutter slips in between the filaments and gives us a much more steady cut. And it also gives us a larger surface to cut. So it makes our rotary cutter much more efficient. As the rotary cutter parts these PVC filaments, what happens is it deposits debris, lint, thread from your cutting material. So it deposits them in between the filaments, which forces the filaments apart. And so here's a representation of some lint in between the filaments, and you see it forces the filaments apart, and that's what we see as scarring. Now, if we can get that lint out of there, then over a short period of time, all the other filaments will help this set of filaments push back together and heal. Now, if the debris is left in there long enough, these filaments become permanently deformed and they can no longer be forced back together, and so you have a scar that doesn't heal. That's because you haven't been maintaining your mat well, or because you've been cutting in the same place over and over again, and you keep forcing these filaments apart, and every time you force them apart perhaps a little bit more because they're already unstably met back together. If we give these filaments a chance to rest and reacquaint themselves with one another, then they're not going to continue parting more and more, and they'll continue being self-healing. So there are a few factors that influence how to use, store, and care for our mats, and that has to do with the composition of PVC. We have to note that ethylene becomes unstable when it is exposed to heat. Well, PVC shares that quality, that characteristic, and this can be what produces those warps and swelling in our mat. And the nature of how PVC is formed has to do with the pressure being applied as the 3 elements bond together. Therefore, that pressure is an influencing factor of our mats. That's why when our mats are pushed off, the filaments of our mat are pushed off for a long period of time, that pressure becomes a permanent characteristic of the filaments, and that pressure pushes the filaments permanently apart. That's why it's important to care for our mats properly. So when we don't allow the debris to press the filaments apart, our mat will serve us better for a longer period of time. Down to caring for our mat. So you have normal cleaning that you need to do. You have regular maintenance that you should be doing, which includes a little bit more than just removing the debris and dust. And then you have the extraordinary stuff that you might do to repair those scars that don't seem to be self-healing on their own. So normal cleaning of your mat is simply removing any marks that have been made on your mat, whether it's from tape or pencil mark, removing the debris and assisting the healing and following it all up with a damp wipe. Now, to remove any marks, I use a rubber eraser, and I just rub it real firmly until that mark goes away. Now, I will tell you, you're not going to get any black mark or any marker. You're not going to get that off, but you will get tape debris, you will get pencil marking, and you'll just get those stray marks that happen when you brush a piece of jewelry or something on your mat. So you just move that out, rub that out with an eraser, and then be sure to take the eraser crumbs away. Now, to remove any debris, a lot of people will use a toothbrush, and they'll, go with and against the cutting mark, the scar. I use a little facial exfoliator. It's a little rubber thing. It's very pliable. I use this because I don't like the bristles of a toothbrush on my mat. And I just rub this with the direction of the scar against the direction of the scar, and then circularly. And I can rub this as much as I want. It's not going to damage my mat. What'll happen is I'll get little pieces of lint and whatnot in here. I just reach around with a lint roller and clean those pieces of debris off of this little facial exfoliator. Now, to assist the healing of my mat, I have this thing called a mat smoother. It's from Colonial Needle, and what I do is, this is kind of like a burnishing stone. What I do with this is I never like saw. You want to treat this better than you treat your fingernails. You want to go brush in the direction, lift, brush in the direction, lift, brush in the direction, lift. If you want to come back in the opposite direction, don't do it at the same time. Go this direction, lift, come back, lift, lift, lift. You always want to do one stroke and one stroke only, because if you start sawing, you're putting yourself in a position to actually cut through the filaments of your mat. So one direction, one direction, one direction, other direction, other direction, other direction. Never circular. This is not what that's made for. Now, if this does not work because the scarring is so deep, you can use a very, very fine grit fingernail buffer block. Same thing. One direction, lift. The other direction, never circular. That's not what this is going to do for your mat. Circular is going to harm your mat. At least once a year I do something extraordinary for my mat. Or if I feel my mat just needs special attention because it's been getting a lot of use and those self-healing scars just don't seem to be wanting to close up. So I will follow my normal cleaning with some special, some extra care. And this is to keep my mat in its top performing condition for as long as possible. And it must be working because I have this 30-year-old craft mat that I have been using really, really consistently for 30 years, and it is still performing as well as it ever did. It's still very pliable, and it's really one of my runaround tools in my studio at all times. Now, since I don't have a tub, that is large enough to soak my largest mat. I treat all my mats the same. So what I do is I put a bath towel underneath the mat that I'm cleaning, and that's to protect the table that I'm on because it's a wooden table. And then I will do a very thorough cleaning of my mat by taking a mild soap like Dawn dish detergent. I'll put a drop of that detergent on my facial exfoliator. I'll dunk this in water, and then I will rub the mat just circularly. Just suds that up all over the mat as much as possible. Occasionally I have to come back in and put another dot, especially for my 24 by 36 inch mat, and then I'll get that running through the mat, scrubbing the mat with that to get all the debris that I can. Sometimes what that will do is that'll moisten some debris that's still down in the filaments, and that's a good thing. So if I see that happening, I take a dry cloth and wipe that dry, and then I come in with my well, first I might come in with a second facial to see if I can pull it out, second facial exfoliator, same thing, just a different color. I'll try to pull it out with that. If I can't get it out with that, then I'll use this mat smoother, and I'll work on that area enough until I really do help it to start rehealing itself. Then I'll take a clean dry cloth and I'll wipe all that soap off, and I'll take another clean cloth and I'll dampen it with water and vinegar. And usually, again, I'll say this, 5 parts water, 1 part vinegar, and I'll wipe that down to get the soap residue off. And after that, then I take a hair product, and I know it's kind of funny, but I am using right now this product, the Main Source. It's a hair care product, but it's only made of natural plant and seed oils. It has no chemicals in it whatsoever, just natural plant oils and natural seed oils. I will put this liberally on my mat, smooth it in, let it sit for about 15 minutes, then I'll come back in with the water and vinegar solution again and wipe that down, and then I'll let it dry thoroughly, and it's usually as good as new. So I have a mat here that is pretty scarred up. It's just a mat that I use occasionally, so it's pretty it's got a lot of debris in it, and I specifically left this mat to get pretty grimy so that I could do this process for you. Now I have a mat just like it that's never been used. I bought these in a pair, and I thought, hey, that's really cute, so I'm going to use that to demonstrate how I do this cleaning. Okay, so this mat is a really cheap mat, so it doesn't have some of the good qualities that my regular mats have, but this is just for junk, really. So I'm going to go ahead and put a pencil mark on here. I don't know if you can see it, but I just drew a pencil mark on there, and I take my eraser to get that pencil mark off. It's totally gone. I'm going to go ahead and see if I can get any lint out of there. That's some. Okay, let's pull some of it out. Because I already know I'm going to be applying soap and whatnot to this, so I'm going to leave this alone. Smoother. I'm not going to use the mat smoother yet. So I'm going to just clean this really good. A little bit of dish soap. Dunk it in the water, and then just start scrubbing it around. Now you've seen that's not sudsing up much. I didn't get enough water. There we go. You start to get some sudsing. And if you'll notice, it suds up the most where there's debris. The reason why it suds up the most where there's debris is because that debris is cotton and it's soaking up the suds. So now I've got that suds in there, so I'm going to take me a rag and I'm going to just see if I can wipe that out. I can tell you right now that pulled out most of the debris. Now I'll take some water and vinegar. And what I'm doing now is I'm getting the soap suds off and the soap debris off as much as possible. And I'm going to dry that down. Now I'll go ahead and take my mat smoother, and I'm just going to go up. Now, because this is a cheap mat, I really don't expect it to look pristine, but I'm seeing some scarring that might not be being taken away, so I'm just going to use this. I'll come in with some vinegar and water to wipe that dust down. And I'm going to go ahead and put my oil treatment on. Just rub that around. I'll just use my hands to rub that around. Now I'm going to let that sit for about 15 minutes, so I'll be back. But this mat now is pretty clean and very nicely conditioned, and it's a lot, it's very similar to the brand new mat that's never been used. It's not something you have to do all the time. You just do it when you feel like your mat needs some special attention. Normally, a vinegar and water solution that you just wipe on it, normally that's good enough. And I would do that vinegar and water solution at least annually, because it does help your mat to retain its usefulness for a much longer period of time than just leaving it to essentially dry rot. So hope that's been helpful, and hope to see you again here on Quilting on a Thread.